Let's play a little quarterback roulette going into the 2026 NFL season. I am recording this the week before the NFL offseason really kicks off, starting, I think, later this week into next week. We're going to get free agency, we're going to get tampering, all of that sort of stuff, all the way through the draft in late April. So you thought NFL season was over? Well, we got a couple weeks off. We're now right back into 2026. So we're going to play a little quarterback roulette to start it off. Basically, what it means is we're going to go through every team. Do they need a quarterback? For a majority, they don't. But for a lot of teams, they do. And what ends up happening is they all just kind of switch quarterbacks because especially this year, there's not a ton of great draft prospects at quarterback. And so what ends up happening is we all just kind of recycle quarterbacks. One man's trash, another man's treasure. We're going to play a little roulette, place each quarterback on their new team. Of course, it's the offseason. I'm essentially going to be playing darts. I hope I'm close to what ends up happening. In a couple weeks, we'll know the answer. But let's play a little quarterback roulette. Let's bring up every team and their quarterbacks from last year. Most of these teams are self-explanatory. A couple teams, I have a couple quarterbacks listed. But for the most part, it was their main quarterback or the most relevant quarterback from last year. Not all 32 teams have quarterback questions. And so let me just put up all the quarterbacks that are pretty much no-brainer starters. They're going to be starting next year. And I have 19 of them. A lot of them are self-explanatory. Going from the top, you got Drake May, Josh Allen. There's no question there. We don't have to talk about it. Even down to guys like Trevor Lawrence, young guys like Cam Ward. He showed enough. He's clearly the starter next year. Even over to the NFC side, Matthew Stafford, he said he's coming back. Sam Darnold just won a Super Bowl. He's obviously coming back. The one quarterback I do want to talk about is the 49ers situation. And I have Brock Purdy and Mac Jones both coming back. There's a lot of rumors that Mac Jones is going to get traded. And I do think he probably should get traded. If I'm the 49ers, I probably want to capitalize on his value. We're going to talk about it, but there's not a lot of great quarterback options out there. So if the 49ers wanted to, they could trade Mac Jones for a decent package. I mean, I'm talking probably a second round pick you could get for Mac Jones. So the question is, do they do that? Do they send him to Minnesota maybe for a second round pick or potentially even more? They say they don't want to do that. Again, I think that's probably the wrong decision, but I'm going to just make the prediction that that stays true. It might be a negotiation tactic, but I think they want to keep him. Is that because Brock Purdy is injury prone? Is that because they happen to be next to an electrical substation? Maybe both of those things. But it is nice to have two good quarterbacks. They learned that this year. So for that reason, I think they might keep him. The rest of them, pretty self-explanatory. As I said, these teams have their quarterback. There's no question. Three other teams that I think are worth at least talking about. I do think they will be starters week one unless something happens. But they're worth just talking about. One of them is CJ Stroud, who I'm going to pencil in for Houston. I do think he is the starter. This is going to be a big year for him. And if he struggles again, especially early on, we can have more questions. But I think right now he's the starter. Don't think they move on from him, especially since there's not a ton of better options. But somebody to note. Another one I think worth talking about, and I am going to pencil him in right now, is Bryce Young. I do think he's the quarterback. The Panthers made the playoffs. He looked okay at times, up and down. Also going to be another big year for him. Is he going to be an actual NFL quarterback who can, command a second contract? Or is it time for Carolina to move on? Those questions are coming. I don't think they're coming this offseason, though, so I think he starts again next year. And then the other one I have, and I'm going to pencil him in, is Tyler Shuck, who went from maybe a little bit overdrafted, even though he went in the second round last year. He was an old quarterback coming out of college. Not really many fans coming out. Was he really going to be anything? Didn't start right away. Spencer Rattler started. But I think he did enough at the end of last year that he, to me, is the penciled starter for next year. So we're going to pencil him in. I think he looked pretty good. And not just like, oh yeah, he was okay for where he was drafted. He is going to get probably a full season to show he is the Saints starting quarterback. And I liked what I saw. I think we can pencil him in. And Saints are happy not needing a quarterback. Because again, I'm going to keep saying it. Not the best year to need a quarterback. So I think they keep him in. So then if you count them all up, that's 22 teams that I have as kind of set at quarterback. That leaves 10 teams that don't have a quarterback, or at least have question marks at quarterback. Now, a couple teams, you'll be like, well, wait a minute. Some of it has to do with injuries. Some of it, their quarterbacks aren't maybe going to be healthy for the full 17-game season. So there is a little bit of question, hence why we're going to talk about them. But 10 open spots, 10 places for starting quarterbacks. So the question is, okay, how do we place new quarterbacks in these new teams? To me, this offseason is going to be really centered around 4 quarterbacks. 2 of them are vets, Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa. It looks like at this point, they are going to be released by their teams. So you're not really going to have to pay them. Their former teams are going to be footing that bill. You can bring them in on a smaller contract. And for both of those guys, they've proven at times they can be a good quarterback. And so now that you're free of their bigger contracts, teams are going to want to give those guys a shot. So I think those 2 are big options. Another one is going to be Malik Willis, who is probably the best free agent quarterback in this class, which if you would have told me that a couple years ago, I would have been like, okay, that doesn't really make sense. Former 3rd-round pick, went to Tennessee, was really bad in Tennessee, ends up going to Green Bay, backed up Jordan Love, and looked pretty good when he had to come in and start the last couple years. And so, I mean, so much so that he's going to command a decent salary. Now, is it anything close to 50, 60 million? No, probably going to be around the $30 million range. And you might think, okay, well, someone who's as unproven as Malik Willis, why would you give him $30 million? That's big when you compare to, again, quarterbacks getting 50 to 60 million. Getting a potential starting level quarterback for $30 million is big. And for the upside that Malik Willis has, that's worth a shot. So I think he's going to be one to watch. And then to me, the 4th one is going to be Kirk Cousins, who to me is kind of the secondary option outside of Malik Willis. A lot older, certainly than Malik Willis. Really no high ceiling, but he has that veteran presence and he has just that floor that if teams are looking for just a solid quarterback, he's probably the best option out there. And so to me, those 4 quarterbacks are going to define this offseason. Where do those 4 quarterbacks go? Once those 4 get placed, then I think we can fill in the rest. And so those 4 are going to be the key. Before we get to those 4, let me just put a couple quarterbacks that I think will stay the same, or at least we know what they're going to be. One of them is going to be Aaron Rodgers, and I'm going to put Aaron Rodgers back in Pittsburgh. I don't really see Aaron Rodgers going really anywhere else. I think really the only other place would be Minnesota if he wants to, complete the Brett Favre arc. If Rodgers wants to play, which at this point I think he is going to play, it's probably in his best interest to just come back to Pittsburgh and, try it again with Mike McCarthy. Apparently they've already had conversations. It didn't end well, but that I don't think is going to stop him from coming back. I do think that's his best spot. So I do think he comes back, gives the Steelers, a decent veteran quarterback for one more year, then they can evaluate next year. So I think he comes back. The Browns, I'm going to put Shedeur Sanders. I'm also going to put Deshaun Watson in there. I think that's your quarterback room next year. I mean, with what you're paying Deshaun Watson, they're not going to pay Malik Willis. They're not going to pay somebody else. I think they're going to give Shedeur Sanders a shot. You've got, I think, one more year of Deshaun Watson on the books. It's another lost year, especially at quarterback. You have Shedeur Sanders for cheap. You have Dylan Gabriel as well if you want to throw him in there. I think you give them one more shot and say, hey, here's your chance. If it doesn't work out, we can just restart at quarterback next year. But I think they kind of stay the same. And then the only other one that's pretty obvious is going to be Fernando Mendoza for Las Vegas. You could argue they might bring in another veteran. If they don't want him to start week 1, they probably bring in at least a guy who's been around, who can be in that quarterback room. But I think it's Mendoza all the way in Vegas. So then that leaves 7 spots left. And we're going to start with the 4 quarterbacks I named. I'm going to start with Kyler. I think he gets released from Arizona. And this is another guy who can't really go many places. He can go to New York, but the Jets, Kyler, I just don't see that working. It's colder up in New York. I don't see that working. Does he go to Indianapolis? Let Daniel Jones kind of rehab? Don't see that happening. I think he kind of wants to be the guy, at least for a little bit. So to me, the best option is going to be Miami. And so I have Kyler going to Miami. It kind of works out because Miami is going to be paying Tua a lot as they release him. So they can bring in Kyler on a cheaper contract than he is on right now. And honestly, just upgrade a little bit from Tua. Is Kyler a perfect quarterback? No. Will Miami certainly have their complaints? Definitely. But I think at least as a pure quarterback, he's better than Tua right now. So you get an upgrade at a cost you can afford. I think that works. So then if Tua's gone from Miami, Kyler's in Miami, where's Tua going to go? Again, not a ton of places that I like Tua in. I don't think he would work out in New York. I don't think Arizona is just going to swap quarterbacks. I think they want to go elsewhere. I'm going to say Tua is going to go to Minnesota and join up with JJ McCarthy. So I have JJ McCarthy and Tua as Minnesota's quarterbacks. There has been rumors after the combine that Minnesota likes Tua. They also like Geno Smith, who we'll talk about, if they don't really have to pay them a lot. And that's the key for a lot of these veteran quarterbacks. If they're going to get released, if you don't have to trade for them, if you don't have to pay their current contract, then some of these quarterbacks will look a little better. And I think Minnesota has to bring in somebody. I don't think they're just going to go JJ McCarthy. And I think Kevin O'Connell will say, hey, Tua has his flaws. He has his limitations. But in my offense that I run, kind of similar to what Mike McDaniel was able to do in Miami, we can kind of scheme Tua up to his strengths. He can throw to Justin Jefferson, throw to Jordan Addison, and we can make it work. And I think at least gives them another option if JJ McCarthy doesn't work out. So I think they bring him in as competition, kind of closes out Minnesota's room. Then that leaves Malik Willis, who I said was the top probably free agent quarterback. And I'm going to have him go to Arizona. Malik Willis takes over for Kyler Murray. The only reason I would say this won't happen is the only reason I would say this wouldn't happen is if Arizona just wants to stray away from dual threat quarterbacks. They think it might be too similar to Kyler. But I think Arizona's at a spot where they need to take some sort of chance. You know, they're in a really tough division. They're really not going to compete for a while. So do you take a chance on a Malik Willis, who might turn out to be a bust? Maybe the couple games in Green Bay, just a mirage. Maybe he's not that good of a quarterback. But you need to take that chance that he could turn into a star. And I think if you're going to swing big on a quarterback, it's going to be Malik Willis. And I think Arizona does that. Then the only other quarterback left is Kirk Cousins. And some people may disagree with this fit. I have Kirk Cousins going to the Jets. And for two reasons. One, this is Kirk Cousins' probably last chance to get any sort of decent paycheck. And I could see him being like, you know what? If you want to sign me to a 1 year, maybe 2 year deal for my last big paycheck, I will take it. I don't care where I play. And two, if I'm the Jets, I would way rather have, a Kirk Cousins type, even a Jacoby Brissett, a Joe Flacco, someone who is a little bit more of an established quarterback who then can help evaluate the rest of the team. Because when you have a quarterback like a Justin Fields, yes, you can take that swing. Jets took that swing, pretty much a swing and a miss. But it was so bad, and he was such a bad quarterback in particular, that you couldn't really evaluate the rest of your roster and the rest of your offense in particular. And someone like Kirk Cousins isn't going to have a high ceiling, and it could be that he just falls off a cliff age-wise and it turns into another mess. It's the Jets, so I can see that happening. But at least it allows you to evaluate Garrett Wilson, to evaluate your offensive line, to evaluate Breece Hall if they bring Breece Hall back. Guys like Justin Fields don't allow that. And you could argue they should sign maybe a Malik Willis. They're not set up to help a guy like Malik Willis succeed. They need someone who can raise the floor. I think that's Kirk Cousins. So I'm going to have him going to the Jets. So then that leaves 3 teams left. And all 3 teams are in pretty much the same situation. They have a quarterback that they would go with, but that quarterback is hurt, has some concern that they will be ready week 1. So there's going to be question, okay, who comes in and joins them in this quarterback room? And of course, I'm talking about Indianapolis with Daniel Jones, who is technically a free agent. I do think they bring him back, but I don't think he will be ready week 1, especially with an Achilles. Might be a little bit. So you need to bring in somebody else. The Falcons with Michael Penix. He probably has the best chance to be ready week 1. But at this point, there's so many question marks with all the knee injuries he's had. I think they bring in somebody else in that room. And then the big one is Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Is he going to be ready week 1? Could he maybe need a couple weeks, You just need a guy who can come in for a couple weeks, maybe a month, give them a good shot, allows Mahomes to come back healthy and still be in a good position to make the playoffs. So those 3 rooms need somebody else, and they need a veteran to come in. And you could kind of flip these. There's enough veteran quarterbacks around, but these are the 3 I landed on. The first one is probably the most boring one and maybe the most obvious. I have Joe Flacco following Kevin Stefanski to Atlanta. He showed in his limited time in Cincinnati, he has what it takes to at least just be an old school gunslinger. You put him on a team with a lot of good weapons. Atlanta, I think, would be one of those. Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, they're bringing him back. And so if Atlanta needed somebody who could just kind of throw to all these great weapons, I think it's Joe Flacco. And he was with Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. Yes, didn't work out as great as Cincinnati, but still, there's some connection there. I think he brings him along, lets him kind of help Penix a little bit. If they need him, he can be a good spot starter. So I think that's a good fit for Atlanta's room. Indianapolis, a little bit harder. I do think they bring Daniel Jones back. I have Geno Smith here. I do think Geno Smith gets a shot somewhere. And there's rumors it could be Minnesota. That's also a good landing spot if Tua doesn't go to Minnesota. And there's a lot of speculation that everything that went wrong with Las Vegas wasn't necessarily Geno's fault. And that's not to say that Geno's a great quarterback by any means, but I was one of those people that thought he was at least an average quarterback, maybe slightly above average. And yet it all came crashing down. A lot of NFL people, it sounds like, maybe want to give him one more shot. I had a kind of a hard time placing him. So I think he goes to Indianapolis, has the biggest runway for a starting opportunity. Again, I think Daniel Jones maybe mid-year if he comes back. So Geno Smith gets kind of a second chance to his second chance. I get he already had a second chance, but he gets another second chance. I like that fit for Indianapolis. And then that leaves Kansas City. And I haven't really heard many people talk about this fit, but it's one that I could see happening for a couple reasons. And as I said, they need somebody who can step in, potentially be a starter for the first few weeks, depending on how Mahomes' recovery works. And it can't be Gardner Minshew. He was the backup last year. He also tore an ACL. So I think they bring in somebody else. And I am going to guess, this is probably a long shot, but I'm going to throw it out there. I have them bringing in Derek Carr. And it's going to be a Mahomes, Derek Carr quarterback room. Now, a couple reasons for this. We just got news the last couple weeks that Derek Carr, who is retired, didn't want to play, had a shoulder injury, was essentially done. He came out and said, hey, I am healthy. I am wanting to potentially get back out there, but I am going to do that on my own terms. And he said he wanted to go to a team where he had a chance to win a Super Bowl. He wasn't just going to come back for any team. Now, no offense, Derek Carr, where you're at in your career, you're not going to win a Super Bowl as a starting quarterback in pretty much all likelihood. Now, the only maybe chance is if he also goes to Minnesota, kind of putting out everybody from Minnesota. If Minnesota wanted to give him a chance, maybe that's his best shot. He could be a full-time starter, potentially have a shot at a Super Bowl. Other than that, I don't think it happens. And if he doesn't want to go to the Jets, if he doesn't want to go to the Cardinals, probably not many other places to fit. And so that's where I came to Kansas City. One, you'd have a chance at a Super Bowl. Now, would you be starting for most of the year? No. But if you want a Super Bowl chance, there's probably no better place than Kansas City, depending on how you feel about their chances this year. But I like the fit because it's a veteran quarterback who can come in, give you a couple starts when Mahomes gets healthy, and then just another veteran quarterback in the room, knows his stuff, has been around. And then selfishly for him, he gets a chance to be on a potentially good team and a potential Super Bowl contender. And so it's an odd fit. Do I see that happening? Maybe not. Probably more of a long shot. But they need to bring in somebody. And if Derek Carr wants to go to a Super Bowl contending team, the Chiefs are probably his best choice, even if maybe they're not a Super Bowl contending team. So we're going to put Mahomes and Carr as the quarterback room in Kansas City. And that's going to complete the quarterback roulette. I have 22 guys staying put, 10 other quarterbacks, essentially swapping places. You know, a lot of it, as I said, it's like roulette. We're just going to throw it out there. Yeah, we're going to try this guy. He hasn't worked in 2 other places, but let's give him a shot. I think that's what happens a lot this year. If you agreed or disagreed with any of the placing, let me know down in the comments who you think is going to go to a specific team. We'll obviously see who's right in the next couple weeks. But for now, hopefully you enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.